All right, welcome back to DTVC Extra. We are finishing our look at the Predator franchise with Predators, the Predator, and Prey. I keep having to recite how to say those, right? It's so much easier if it was just Predator 3, Predator 4, and Predator 5, right? That would make it a lot easier, but that's not how they decided to label them. So before we do that, just to mention again that our next franchise is going to be the John Wick films. So I think in 2 weeks' time we'll be looking at John Wick 1 and John Wick 2, and then 2 weeks after that we will be looking at 3 and 4. Still debating about whether or not I want to do the Continental as well. If I do, that would be another episode tacked on to the end after 3 and 4. I'm not sure yet, just because part of the reason why I want to do the movies is that they're Keanu Reeves, right? They're not like a spin-off kind of thing. So that's part of the reason why I was looking at it. Well, we'll see. We'll kind of see. We'll see how that goes. But like I said, earlier this week went with the DTV Connoisseur podcast, the main podcast. Really great reception to these Predator episodes. So really been enjoying that. And so I'm trying to kind of keep that momentum going. And it seemed like John Wick was a great way to keep that momentum going. So, one I would like to do at some point is Rambo. It's just a matter of finding them available enough. I don't have a large physical media collection, so it's hard for me to, if they're not on streaming, it's hard for me to mix them in properly. And I think the Rambo ones, it seems like they're available to rent, and the price would get up pretty quickly there, right? It's like, I get $1 rental here and there from my cable company, or a $4.90, $3.99 here or there isn't horrible, but if 3 Rambo movies are only available to rent, that's $12 right there. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up. So that's the issue there. So I'm already paying, whatever it is a month for all these streaming services. So I'd like to try to take advantage of those. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But again, John Wick will be what we'll be doing after that. All right, so why don't we get stuck in a little bit here. Before we get into the 3 Predators, I want to kind of set the stage for the conversation that I'll be having with those. And one of the things I was thinking about, recently, I made an appearance on the All 90s Action All the Time podcast with Scott Murphy, who you've probably heard him on the main podcast here, where he's kind of on a quest to go through Seagal's DTV oeuvre. And so it's been a lot of fun doing that with him, going through those movies. But I was on his podcast with his co-host Craig to talk about Highlander 3, The Final Dimension, I guess it was. I jokingly call it Highlander 3, The Do-Over. But the main idea, right, with these Highlander movies is that you had the first Highlander movie, and it was very clear that there wasn't supposed to be a sequel after that first Highlander movie, right? The whole thing finishes, right? It starts and finishes. Or, we're kind of coming in at the end of the Highlander saga, right? That, most of the Highlander, the Immortals have killed each other. It's down to the final 2. It's down to Christopher Lambert and Clancy Brown. And when Lambert wins, that's it, right? He's the final one. He is the only one. And then I guess the movie did well enough. And it didn't do it well initially in the theater, but it kind of built a good audience, which I could totally see that for myself, of that age group. That the movie was just very rock and roll. It was very much like what we were seeing on MTV at the time. Russell Mulcahy, of course, someone who was one of the first, major music video directors. You've got the Queen soundtrack. And the whole thing just kind of really, really built from there. And I could see where the studio would say, well, we need to capitalize on that and make a sequel. So they tried the first time, right, with Highlander 2, The Quickening, the whole Planet Geist thing and all that kind of Zeist or Geist, I can't remember, whatever the planet was, with Michael Ironside, Michael Ironside's chewing scenery was pretty fun in that movie. We bring, Sean Connery back. It's a whole trip. When the first images I got of that Highlander 2, I remember, was Siskel and Ebert making fun of it on their show. So that movie was kind of panned and it didn't do well. So it's like, okay, well, we got to come up with another part 2. It's almost like they do part 3 as a new version of part 2, where they act like part 2 didn't happen, and this part 3 is a different version of it. At the same time, they came up with this alternate timeline for the TV show, where on the TV show, Lambert does kill Clancy Brown, but it's not the end, right? There's plenty of immortals there. And I think it was one of those things where they were kind of trying to see what stuck there, right? So let's try another Highlander movie with Lambert. At the same time, let's try this TV show with Adrian Paul, this syndicated show, and let's see which one goes well. And of course, the TV show, I think, showed that for Highlander, there's a lot more you can do with it if you've got it in a TV show format. First off, we had really great villains, right? Roland Gift is Xavier St. Cloud right there. There's Grayson. There was Collis. Just some really, really great there. And even just the one-off baddies, like when you had Roddy Piper, or Brian James. Those were a lot of fun. Some really interesting ideas, Byron James was one, and Mary Shelley sees him kill an immortal, and that's where she comes up with the idea for Frankenstein. Just a really interesting idea that they had there. Even cool characters that were like, guest characters, right? You had Dawson, you had Elizabeth Grayson, you had Roger Daltrey. All of those characters were really fun. Even Richie was fun, who fortunately found out he's no longer with us. Stan Kirsch killed himself, which is really sad news. But anyway, they had these sort of disparate ideas going on, and eventually it was the show that won out, right? And that's where they ended up going, right? Is that they made Endgame, they sort of passed the torch, but you had a few different ideas. And I feel like Predator's a similar situation, where you had the first movie and then the second movie are kind of a clear combination, right? They clearly go together. The story clearly continues from one to the other. But then it's one of those things where so many people had their fingers in the pie, I guess you could say, that the story starts going in all kinds of directions, right? So we start with Alien versus Predator, where suddenly we're saying the Predator are Anunnaki, right? Which doesn't quite square as much as you'd like it to with the other movies, but it's this idea that they've been coming to Earth for thousands of years, right? And, doing all this stuff. The second Aliens versus Predator really follows directly in line with that first one. With these three movies we're talking about today, none of them completely follow in line with either the Alien versus Predator or even in necessarily the movies that came before it. So, for example, this first one here, Predators, Robert Rodriguez was pretty clear that he didn't want anything to do with anything but the first Predator movie. So he was even, I don't know if decanonizing is the right word, right? I don't know if we were decanonizing at that stage, but he wanted this movie to only follow part one, not even part two. And then when you get into The Predator, that one seems to include everything, including the Alien versus Predator movies. It's sort of like Shane Black just kind of throws everything in together into like one big pot and says, let's do it all. And then the one that we'll be finishing with, Prey almost seems to just only talk about 1 and 2. So it's an interesting way that they're looking at these movies, that, this first one here only likes the first movie. The second one wants everything and just make everything, I guess, canon or part of the timeline or part of the storyline. And then Prey seems to only deal with the first and second movies. All right, so why don't we get stuck in on Predators? So we left off last time. We left off with Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which had a couple things going for it, right? One is it made a lot of money, or it did well in the box office, but also it was critically panned. And it kind of made Fox decide, we're not going to do any more Alien versus Predator films. And so then, they talked to Ridley Scott, who decided that he was going to create his own prequels to Alien, which essentially erased the Alien versus Predator films. But from a Predator standpoint, from the Predator side of it, that wasn't quite so clear. But the other thing, of course, is that when we go from 04 to 07, it's like after, Predator 1 and Predator 2, we're kind of making movies closer together, which we hadn't really seen before with Predator, right? It had been a long time between movies. So to have a couple movies come close together like that, so 04, 07, and now think of something else in 2010, there was a sense that, like, okay, there was a market for Predator and people really wanted to see the Predator. What I discovered, or what I found out, and I think maybe this is common knowledge for other people, but Robert Rodriguez was actually tapped to make Predator 3 in the mid-90s, maybe 94. And his treatment was considered too expensive by Fox executives. And of course, remember that the second movie didn't do so hot in the theater, so they wouldn't have wanted to greenlight a big production. But the idea was that Robert Rodriguez was almost wanting some sort of arena kind of thing, kind of like what we got with Thor Ragnarok to some extent. But it was going to be maybe more bonkers, right? He wanted to be even crazier, where you've got predators and you've got Dutch, from the first movie, fighting predators in some kind of an arena type environment, which just sounds really crazy, but it also sounded like it was, from Fox's standpoint, it was going to cost a lot of money. Then fast forward after the two Alien vs. Predator films come out, and especially the second one gets really critically panned, Fox comes back to him and says, hey, actually, your treatment was kind of what we should have done to begin with. We shouldn't have done these Alien vs. Predator films. Would you like to come back and make it for us? And so he did. Now, of course, again, you can see in his his quotes on this that he kind of shits all over the previous movies. He essentially says, well, only the first Predator is worth following, right? Which, to me, American English, the best we have is nerve, right? It takes a lot of nerve. I think the UK cheek is better here. It's a lot of, you got to have a lot of cheek to shit on a movie that's actually that's actually better than the movie you're making. Predator 2 is objectively better than Predators. I think that's just a clear thing to say. You might have your own personal tastes in these kinds of things, but Predator 2 is objectively better than what Rodriguez and company gave us here with Predators. And so to be talking about how like, oh, part 2 is not even worth our time, when part 2 is better than what you made, I think, I don't know. It's just, definitely, like I said, takes a lot of cheeks to kind of have that mentality. But anyway, he works on this idea that it's not quite the arena idea, but the idea of a game preserve. And of course, he's also working with Nimrod Antal. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly here. But they're working on this sort of this version of the movie where instead of it being an arena, it's a game preserve, and you take some of Earth's like worst killers, right, most vicious killers, and you drop them in this game preserve, and then you have predators chasing after them, right? That's the idea, and they've got to survive, and it adds some new ideas. Obviously, this game preserve idea is a new idea. It adds in the idea of hunting dogs that sort of flesh out the killers. It adds the idea of there being a feud between like smaller predators and bigger predators. The thing is, there's a lot of these ideas that just aren't really used or aren't fleshed out. Like the idea of the feud is barely fleshed out, right? It's just kind of a small thing, but it's not really there as like a huge, as a huge idea. I was trying to figure out why this didn't land the way it should have, because it seems like it should. I mean, I love Adrian Brody. He's one of my favorite actors. I love The Pianist. I love a lot of his stuff. I remember his Oscar-winning speech that he gave. It was, he just seems really great. I'm just a big fan of his, and I think if you're going to have a dramatic actor playing a mercenary, I think someone like Adrian Brody, who can really get in and do the method stuff, is the way to go. And he really works here. I think if you thought about it, you'd probably say, I don't know if this is going to work, but he's good. He turns up his New York accent a bit. He just really goes for it. And he's not a hero in the sense of like he's always good, right? He's kind of in it for himself. And then the other kind of head of the crew is played by Alice Braga. The character's name is Isabel, who they kind of hint that she's part of the Israeli Secret Service or the IDF. So those two are kind of the heads, and then there's a whole bunch of other baddies with them. So Walton Goggins from Fallout is the new show he's on. He plays this character named Stans, who's like a busted out of prison. Topher Grace is in it. Got another Oscar winner, right, in Mahershala Ali. He plays I think it's RUF. He plays somebody from Sierra Leone who was not a nice guy, right? Not a great one of the rebels, maybe one of the rebel forces, but kind of people that would force people into mining diamonds, going through villages and killing people. That was the kind of character that he plays. So really batty. Danny Trejo, he plays a Mexican cartel guy. Oleg Tarkarov is in it as a Russian soldier, Spetsnaz. And then we got Louis Ozawa, who plays Hanzo. He plays Yakuza. He plays a Yakuza. Doesn't break his own neck like in Showdown in Little Tokyo, but we've got him as well. But really, you kind of get these two characters that kind of move to the top, right? With Brody's character Royce and then Braga's character Isabel. And the sense that you get is the only reason why Brody really cares about Isabel is that he respects her, right? That she's done enough to earn his respect that he's willing to help her. Really, he doesn't care about anybody else. And the rest of the crew are just, they're not very likable either, right? They're all bad. I mean, and Walton Goggins, his criminal, his prison character is like, he's talking to Topher Grace about how, I can't wait till I get out of this place and I get home. I'm gonna rape a bunch of women, stuff like that, like things that aren't gonna make you want to root for them. And I think it's the overall issue with this movie compared to the first Predator, because this is definitely trying to bite on the first Predator. It's trying to definitely use the first Predator as inspiration, and then instead of them being in a jungle in America, on Earth, they're in a jungle on another planet, right? These characters have been transported there and they've got to find their way out. So it's a very similar idea, but the thing is, those characters in that first Predator were fun to watch. They were people that you cared about, that you wanted to see things either go good or bad for them. There was a good amount of development there, but it was organic development within the confines of the story that just worked really well. So, I mean, you get Jesse the Body Ventura, beyond Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers, right? You've got Jesse the Body Ventura, you got Bill Duke, Sonny Landham. Shane West, of course, we'll be talking about in the next segment. He's also has a small part in there. Those characters meant more. So seeing them get picked off, right, was kind of, more of a concern. Where, like, here, I'll be honest, I don't know how much I'm upset that Walton Goggins' character gets it, right? In fact, I was kind of okay with him getting it. I'm okay with Danny Trejo's character getting it, I'm okay with these characters getting killed, which doesn't help, right? That doesn't help the situation. I get what Robert Rodriguez and company were trying to do here, this idea of predators can mean the actual aliens attacking them, and predators can be our people that are kind of in the milieu fighting. Right, they're both predators, right? I that idea is kind of cool, but like when you get down to it, like you need to have people to root for. And I mean, definitely, I rooted for Adrian Brody. I definitely rooted for Alice Braga. So I guess that maybe that sense it worked out that I would want to see them get through it, but that, yeah. So that's I was trying to figure that part out, and I was reading some of the reception on Wikipedia, and they mentioned, I think it was actually Roger Ebert himself who said that like, yeah, this movie doesn't really do it the way the first one does because we don't care about these people as much, and there isn't enough development for them. It just doesn't kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't work like that. I was thinking about some other ideas when it comes to the fact that this is supposed to be a game preserve. And so, my dad is a hunter. He was teaching me how to hunt when I was growing up, and I just didn't have the attention span for it. I think now, maybe just being older and living in situations like, here in Philadelphia where you're constantly having to wait for subways, for buses, flying is always about waiting, right? Hurrying up and waiting. I've just my brain is more used to it. I can stand in line for large amounts of time. And, as long as I think, something's happening, I'm okay with it. But back then when I was younger, my dad was teaching me about hunting. I couldn't sit in a tree stand and just watch something happen all day or whatever. But my dad never hunted on preserves, except that he was going to kind of later, and he was thinking about doing it, I don't know, like maybe 15, 20 years ago, thinking about like maybe going to some preserves in Canada or something like that. But he never really did that. He kind of went out in sort of wooded areas where there were deer that were wild, roaming free, and he would shoot them. I remember in the woods behind my house, we had a wooded area there, and he shot a deer one time and came home. I was living with my parents at that time, and he was like, "Yeah, I need you to help me carry this deer back to the house." And so I had to go with him and lug. It was like a 150-pound deer. We had to lug it through the woods. Yeah, definitely. I can kind of still feel it in my shoulders having done that. But anyway, but thinking about some of the things about like these game preserves, one of my understandings was, yes, they would stock with animals, but I think they would also let the animals breed and live inside the preserve, which would be an interesting idea, right? Is that, you've got actual humans that are living and breeding inside this environment, and then the predators come every once in a while and hunt them. That would be, one interesting idea, perhaps. I don't know. Another one is just having other aliens there, right? And so there's a little bit of an alien where they use what was the original design of the Predator back when Van Damme was supposed to be the Predator in the first movie. They use that kind of design, and they kind of have that alien there for a bit and then disappears. They don't really do much with it, though. I think that would have been something, to have other aliens there. Even have maybe other aliens explaining what's going on. So, because there's a lot of leaps of faith. There's a lot of like, Adrian Brody's character is like, he's like figuring things out a little bit too easily. And I think it would have been nice to just have somebody there explaining things better or something like that, and have other aliens there or something like that, just to kind of mix it up. And almost they could have done almost like a Tatooine kind of thing, right, with like sort of a more wretched hive of scum and villainy that are all sort of banding together. That could have been interesting, but they didn't, right? It's just humans, just that's all they do. There's also a concept that I think would have been interesting, and as we get into the other movies, especially the next one, I think it's a little bit more relevant there as well. But the idea of like, okay, if the predators are feuding, right, if they're not getting along or something like that, what about an idea of like a predator, like a PETA organization in Predator, where they're like protesting against using humans as hunting humans, right? And can you imagine like maybe like there's sort of these inside videos and things like that they're showing, and of course the Predator, it's not like they hide anything, right? I think everything that shows up on their helmets goes out to the Predator world or something like that, so everybody can see it. You imagine like some of that kind of stuff. I mean, I've seen some of the PETA videos and they're pretty gruesome, right? Because they want you to know how rough it is, right? To what happens at factory farms, what happens with furring operations, those kinds of things, and doing something similar to that I think would be interesting if there's sort of like this movement of within the predator race of like and maybe when that's where like the feud is, right? Or even just doing more within the feud, right? Like, okay, so if what if the feud has like, I don't know, metaphors for racism or sexism or those kinds of things in our society? That could be really interesting, right? I mean, what if one of them was a female predator who's comes to the planet and the other predator's like, no, you can't hunt as a predator. I mean, 'cause we don't know, like those ideas. So this was just very simple of just like, it's sort of like a very simple version of the Most Dangerous Game construct, right? Which we see in so many direct-to-video movies, and they were just like, okay, let's do Most Dangerous Game, but with predators, and that's really all it is. And when I think of the second movie, which again Robert Rodriguez made it sound like that, this movie, and there's a scene in Predators where they're talking and Adrian Brody recognizes that Alice Braga when she sees one of the predators, because what happens with those feuding predators, they catch the bigger predators catch a smaller one. They kind of string them up on this like totem thing, and Adrian Brody's like, yeah, you recognize that. What's going on? And she starts talking about what happened in 1987, but doesn't talk about 1997. Right, that doesn't get mentioned. That's kind of left out, at least as far as I can remember. So yeah, Robert Rodriguez had disdain for the second movie, which when I think of the second movie compared to this one, first off, the second movie was totally balls to the wall, right? It was just out there with all kinds of craziness that was going on, and it worked. For a movie like The Predator, I think it worked. And I do kind of, it disappoints me that Robert Rodriguez didn't see how great. Maybe he's come around, I doubt it, but how great that was. But I do also, when you look at how this movie was executed and sort of what was done with it, it is, again, it's objectively not as good as the second movie. I think when I look at this, when I rank the Predator movies, I actually put this one below the first Alien versus Predator as well, which that's more of a personal taste thing, I think. But also, again, that's another movie that Robert Rodriguez thought, okay, he was just shitting on. He didn't, think it was worthy of his time. I actually like what goes on in that movie more than this movie. I think the idea of like the hunting game for the predators was kind of a more fun idea than the game preserve thing here. And again, really, you're just kind of ripping off the Most Dangerous Game with a few little elements here or there that a few twists and turns, but that's about it. So I kind of have this, I guess, I don't I don't want to tell you my whole ranking, right? Because we've got Prey and the Predator to go, and so I don't want to step over those conversations here at all. But yeah, so I think kind of overall on this one here, again, I remember it came out in 2010. It's interesting, when I was watching it, there's a sense that I'd seen it in the theater, and I really can't remember if I would have or not. I would have moved back from, I was living in Portland in 2009 and moved back to my hometown of Kittery. I think I moved in with my parents at that time for a spell. And I want to say that I had, I might have gone to see this in the theater, but I can't remember. I would have had to go back up to Portland because I would have seen it with those friends that lived in Portland, and I don't really remember if that's what happened or not. So, but it feels like a movie that I saw in the theater, which I remember seeing the first Alien versus Predator in the theater, but none of the other ones. But as I was watching this one again, there was that sense of like, oh, maybe I did see this. So, we'll see. Some other things in the movie. I mean, Mahershala Ali, can see how he's going to be a really great Blade. He's cool here. Again, his character doesn't get much, right? He doesn't get, for an ensemble cast like this, these characters don't get a lot. I mean, Louis Ozawa, he gets a really, really nice fight with the Predator at the end. They kind of have like a samurai fight. That was cool. But for the most part, nobody really gets a lot of good stuff in this movie. We've got Chekhov's neurotoxin with Topher Grace, where, he's like, finds this plant that's like oozing this neurotoxin. He's like, oh yeah, he's explaining what it is. We're like, okay, you're going to be using that at some point, aren't you, Mr. Grace? And sure enough, towards the end, he does. So you get some of those kind of elements there as well. But yeah, I think for me, again, this is the first standalone Predator film since part 2, right? And so if we're waiting that long for our and I mean, what is this? This is like, it's almost 20 years, right? I keep thinking 1992 for the Predator but it's actually 1990. I think it's because there's a 2. You know, maybe that's why you don't use numbers in sequels, right? Because it screws up what year the movie came out, right? Yeah, I don't. But 1990. So we've gone 20 years without a standalone Predator film, and I guess if it, you know, I think. I'm trying to think how I want to say this. This isn't the movie I would have wanted necessarily. It's not bad. It's not, you know, I don't know. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not as good as some of the other ones. It just, yeah, it doesn't have that kind of balls to the wall vibe that the second movie had. And I do think more of that movie should have been in this. I think that would have worked better for me. Yeah, I think that, you know, I there's some things that I just think I wish they'd been fleshed out better. I wish they had fleshed out more the whole thing with the with the small predators and the big predators. I wish there was more made of that. The other thing too, I guess, is that we run into the same problem that we've run into with all of the other ones. Is that it's more about humans than it is about predators and whoever else, aliens or whoever else is in the movie. It's just, these movies are too human-centric. And if you're going to make them so human-centric, the characters really have to pop for that to work, because ultimately we're there watching a movie to see the predator, right? That's the idea. That's what we want to see. And it's kind of a horror movie thing, right? More than anything, right? When you watch a Nightmare on Elm Street, you know, you want compelling characters, right? You want Nancy, right? Nancy's a compelling character there. Or, you know, the Friday the 13th, you know, you need somebody there that you can kind of glom onto, right? Or, you know, Halloween, right? You think of whether it's Danielle Harris or Jamie Lee Curtis, right? You know, when the movie's based on the baddie, right? You need some heroes that you can really root for here. And I think this idea of having like the baddest killers on this planet, they're bad guys, right? These are people that we would want our heroes to kill, except for, you know, Adrian Brody's character and Alice Braga's character. For the most part, we want our heroes to kill these guys. So when the Predator kills them, it's not the worst thing in the world. And I think that's probably the ultimate area where this one is sautéed and wrong. So I think that's where this one kind of misses its mark the most. But I think also, to sort of, again, as we're talking about sort of timelines and those kinds of things, this is the first attempt. This is not as much of an official attempt as, say, the Ridley Scott movies to erase the Alien versus Predator films. But they also kind of make it clear that they're not really delving into those at all either. They don't make any mention of them. There's no talk of them at all. So it's an interesting idea. It would be interesting to kind of see how you would fit those in with this. This is kind of, this really, it's, the fact that this thing only really follows the first movie makes it kind of interesting in that sense. But yeah, I mean, would I like to see another movie like this? I mean, the other thing is that they kind of set up the possibility of a sequel because, you know, Adrian Brody's character and Alice Braga, they kind of walk off, right? They're the survivors and they don't get off the planet. I always kind of feel like that's a lazy way to end a movie like that. Right, you've got our characters, and the whole goal is for them to survive and get off the planet and get home to Earth, right? That's their goal. That's what they're trying to do. And when you leave it open and you don't actually follow through on that ending, it's lazy to me. I think you've got to get them home. That's the goal. They either die or they get home. It's lazy to just be like, no, you're stuck here still. I think they should have either commandeered a ship and flown back or convinced the Predator to take them back. I think that would have been a better ending, because it would have been more fulfilling to kind of get them there. Anybody can write an end that just means the characters don't get where they're supposed to go, right? Anybody can do that, but how do you have them succeed, right? How do you get them where they're supposed to be, succeed or fail, right? How do you do that? How do you do one or the other? You know, again, it's easier for them to fail than it is to succeed. So I think that part of it too always kind of, I don't know. I don't like those kinds of endings where it's just sort of, you know, I mean, think about, like, for example, the ending to Predator 2, which is a much more fulfilling ending than this movie has, where, you know, Danny Glover has just killed the Predator and all the other Predators show up, right? They all uncloak and they all walk around him and we think, oh, what is going on now? And they're like, no, hey, we respect you for killing our guy. You know, here's this gun, and go ahead, you know. But also, we're not really letting you know that we're about to take off. So it's up to you to get out of here if you want to stay on your home planet and not take off with us. It was like a fun, fitting, fulfilling ending to that movie. And this movie doesn't really give you that satisfaction, which I think is also frustrating. I think we needed something to get us there. We needed something to get us home. And I would have liked to have seen that as well. All right, I think that's enough on Predators. So, again, it's not that I didn't like it. I just didn't like it as much as the earlier ones. And I think if I'm waiting 20 years for a sequel, I would have liked something with a little bit more bite to it than what we got here. So, yeah, so what we'll do here, we'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about The Predator. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. All right, we are back, and before we get stuck in on The Predator, a couple things I wanted to mention from the previous segment. One was a mistake that I made. I referred to the director of The Predator as Shane West when it's Shane Black. I think the reason is that Ty and I were looking for our June episode when he's going to be on. We're looking at doing Dermot Mulroney because the film he did with Art Camacho is now on Hulu, so we're going to do that one. We're thinking of another movie to pair it with, and this movie called The Dirty South that has him and Shane West in it. So I had Shane West on the brain, and that's why I called Shane Black Shane West. But no, Shane Black is the one who directs The Predator. So that's one thing. The other thing is I can't believe I buried the lead on this, and maybe I probably could have even just gone back and edited the previous segment and put this in properly, just added it in. But I figured it's easier. Maybe it's a better bridge to this movie here to do it here. But I completely forgot to mention that the reason why Robert Rodriguez called Predators was that he wanted it to be like Aliens was to Alien, right? So you had Alien and the sequel was Aliens. He wanted to do the same thing. Again, further removing Predator 2 from the canon. I mean, he's essentially, as we talked about with Highlander 3 being the do-over, he's trying to make Predators the do-over, the Highlander 3 the new dimension. And to be honest, I mean, he's I don't want to say that he's got the cinematic equivalent of Mario Van Peebles chewing on a condom, but this, in his attempt to erase Predator 2 from existence, I think he did worse with Predators. But anyway, completely forgot to mention that he, essentially Highlander 3'd, because Predators is supposed to be part 3, but he named it the way that Aliens was named as the part 2 of the Alien franchise. He named it with the similar convention, trying again to play on the fact that this was the actual sequel, not Predator 2. So yeah, I think it's a shitty thing to do. I think, but also I think again it takes a lot of cheek to shit on a movie and then make your movie and have it be worse than that movie. And I think again maybe the second Predator didn't do as well in the theater as Predators did, but again, objectively, Predator 2 is a better movie than Predators. It just does more there. So that's, anyway, maybe it's a good bridge, though, as we get into The Predator. All right, so 8 years after Predators comes out, we've got Shane Black here. Shane Black had just come off of a successful run with Iron Man 3, and so let's see here. I think Iron Man 3 comes out in 2013, so actually still a good 5 years after. But I mean, Iron Man 3 is the most financially successful of the Iron Man films. It's one of the few MCU movies that isn't an Avengers movie to do over $1 billion. I off the top of my head, I can think of like 4 or 5 of them that didn't. Iron Man 3 is one of those ones. I think he does a great job of getting us, home on Iron Man, kind of putting that series to bed. It's a very solid movie. It kind of just works there. Obviously, we know of him as a writer, writing Lethal Weapon movies. Last Boy Scout was one I saw in the theater, and I remember. One of my all-time favorite scenes is the one where Bruce Willis is handcuffed and he says to this baddie, like, if you touch me again, I'm going to kill you. And the guy does, and he like headbutts him and headbutts his nose up into his brain and kills him. And the other guys are like, "Oh my God, he killed him! Blah, 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 blah. So just absolutely great stuff. But he is a really great writer here, and I think we were excited to see what he would do with The Predator. And so a few things I think in terms of 2018. We've talked about this before, that in the late 2010s, you're seeing the point where Disney is starting to kind of get a stranglehold on on the market. Also, around this time is when Disney has kind of put it, finalizing their deal to buy out 20th Century Fox. We know with 2019's X-Men Dark Phoenix movie that they didn't put a lot behind that one. So, they're kind of, there wasn't a lot, I guess, for this. Those movies did open in a lot of screens. So there is that part of it, that it was, say like I think it was like, it set a record for making the least amount of money for the amount of screens that it opened in. I think that was kind of the deal there. I'm trying to think between this one and Deadpool 2, when they kind of, what the release dates were. I think they're similar. So Deadpool 2 was earlier in the year, I guess. I didn't even realize that. It was May of 2018. And so then this one comes out in September of 2018, so it's later that year. I don't remember there being the kind of media blitz that we had for Deadpool 2. That was definitely, Fox knew at that time that they had something with Deadpool 2. This one, and maybe too that's the difference in those time windows there. I mean, I can't remember exactly when it was when the deal was finalized, when they bought Fox. I want to say it was probably more like 2019, but I think, I'm a little bit off on some of those dates there. But I just remember this movie didn't get anywhere near that kind of pub. And, I think Deadpool 2 may have been, again, it was something everybody was excited for, excited to see. And I mean, it just, the movies from a standpoint, because again, these are kind of the two Fox movies that they have coming out that year. From a budget standpoint, they're close. So this one was, I'm trying to think, The Predator, I want to say was 88 million, right? And it was 110 for Deadpool 2. But then when the gross is, right, you're looking at 160, so not even quite twice the budget back for Predator. It was still pretty good, I think, for what this movie was. Whereas Deadpool, I mean, almost 800 million worldwide gross. It just, it is, I think it is the best out of the two. I think it's like the best of all the Marvel, the Fox X movies. It, just absolutely kind of kills that. But, I think, considering what Deadpool 2 represented, you would have thought that The Predator had a chance to be, something really good. So why doesn't it, right? Why is it not so good? The other thing I think that's important here is that we were just talking about Robert Rodriguez and how he kind of was shitting on the previous entries in the franchise. Didn't really want to admit that number 2 happened, let alone the Alien vs. Predator films. He's naming his movie Predators as a play on Aliens to make it seem like this is the real sequel. Shane Black goes in a different direction, right? Shane Black is, there's some mentions of the we get to see in one of the scenes, we see the weapon that Sanaa Lathan uses in Alien vs. Predator. It's in this big government compound that's like, studying the predators. So he's incorporating Alien vs. Predator in this movie. It definitely incorporates part 2. Jake Busey is in this, and he's playing the son of the character Keyes that his father played in part 2. So we've got that. They even mention it right away. Sterling K. Brown plays his character Traeger, who's like a government agent who's like investigating predators. He says, 87 and 97, right? That's when they came. So he's incorporating definitely part 2, but also more of it, but also a little bit of the Alien vs. Predator films. And then again, this movie is supposed to take place before Predators. There's a few different terms I heard for this: midquel, interquel, that kind of thing. There's some issues though with this movie, I think, and there's some reasons why I think it didn't work. One is the story kind of gets on this crazy convoluted path that predators are harvesting human DNA to improve themselves. They're essentially just using DNA from all over the universe, or I guess the galaxy or whatever, to make themselves better in terms of their own evolution. And so that's why they're coming to Earth. And I guess the other thing is that due to global warming, we've maybe only got a couple generations left, and so they're coming here. They're trying to get as much from us as they can before we kill ourselves off. Which it makes sense, right? I mean it's got to be an interesting thing if you are the predators watching humans, right? Because it's like, what's killing the planet, but you've got these massive things called corporations that pump all this stuff called money into this system, and money is like the most valuable thing. And so they're able to use this money to obfuscate the issue and make it seem like maybe it's not human created global warming. Anybody out there who doesn't believe in global warming, just know that there's never been a peer-reviewed article that has said that man-made climate change is not a thing. The article or the science that says that is not really science. It's more just, again, obfuscation. So for predators, right, they'd be looking at me like, okay, well, before these people kill themselves, before they kind of Easter Island themselves or Mayan civilization themselves, let's get as much DNA as we can in the process. It's a weird concept because it's like, oh, now we've got these sort of super predators that I guess I don't even know what human DNA would do to make them super, other than I guess the fact that like you could see like on our spectrum that we see on, you don't have to just see on the heat spectrum, you could see on like a regular, and I guess that's one way that you could do it. I don't really know, but that's the idea. And then the other thing is that that our hero, he's played by what's the guy's name? Boyd Holbrook. Just your standard white guy hero, right? Just kind of just there, just nothing really exciting about him. His son is on the autism spectrum. And he encounters the main character. He's like this, soldier. It's funny. His ex-wife, who is played by Yvonne Strahovski. Remember her from like that show with Zachary Levi. Was it like Chuck or something? Good Luck Charlie, or whatever it was. But she was on that show. But anyway, she plays his wife. And there's a scene where they're talking about the main character. His character's name is Quinn McKenna. But the other guys that are around him are talking about him, and she does this like Seagal-esque info dump. And I mean, I don't know if Shane Black just pulled it from a bad Seagal movie, but it was bad Seagal, right? It was like, that character who's like there for the CIA, and he's telling somebody else about how badass Seagal is, right? Oh man, this motherfucker, he like CIA, and he's 3 tours with this and that, and he, you don't want to mess with him, you don't want to see, da 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 da. She does the exact same thing, like the bad Seagal info dump. If you listen to any of our the podcast episodes I've done with Scott Murphy on Seagal movies, we joke about that Seagal info dump scene. So to see it in what is supposed to be a blockbuster, right? What is an $88 million movie, to be using a flimsy Seagal DTV, Keone Waxman directed device in this it's fugazi, right? For sure. So anyway, so there's that. The fact that the character, the son is on the autism spectrum, they lead into these bad stereotypes about kids who are on the spectrum who, like this idea that they're all geniuses and they all see patterns with math and things like that really well, and it's a tired, kind of weird, gross stereotype that you're just kind of like, in 2018, are we still doing this? Like, is this what we're, this is this, I don't know. I didn't like it. Of course, I don't. Obviously, how I am with kids in movies. I'm not a huge fan of kids in movies. So this wasn't working to begin with. But then it's like they throw in that stuff, and it's just kind of awkward. Olivia Munn was pretty solid. She plays this character Casey Brackett, who's like a scientist who is like excited by the idea that there's aliens, and she wants to study them and that kind of thing. So there's that piece. The other element of the story, of course, is that this Boyd Holbrook character, because he encounters a predator. The government wants to shut him up so he can't talk about the predator, right? So they classify him as insane, and he and some other prisoners who, are assault servicemen who have been classified insane, they're about to get taken to an asylum, and then they bust out, and that's when they fight the predator. So some of the characters we have here, we've got Thomas Jane in this. He plays this character Baxley, who's got Tourette's. Keegan Michael Key is in this as well. He's kind of his Jane's buddy. Trevante Rhodes plays a character named Nebraska Williams, and so I believe I'm not sure. I believe he starred with Mahershala Ali in Moonlight. I think they were together in that movie. So I don't know if he won an Oscar for his role in that. I know the movie won 3 Oscars, right? But it's one of the things I think that kind of hurts the movie, actually, is that he is a really great actor, and he's really, really compelling. And I mean, Mahershala Ali, I'm not saying that he's not a great actor, too. It's just like his character in Predators didn't have a lot to do. So it's just kind of like, okay, there he is. He just sort of, so he's sort of good. Oh, so let's see. Oh, so he actually wasn't nominated, or doesn't look like he had any he wasn't a part of the award set. Mahershala Ali, of course, won Best Actor in a supporting role in Moonlight, but Trevante Rhodes didn't win. He wasn't nominated or won, but he's in the movie with Mahershala Ali that was nominated and did win Oscars. And I mean, he turns in a really, really great performance, both in that movie and this movie. And this is where the issue comes in, is that we have a very one-note hero who, we do the cheap Seagal info dump with him. And I mean, he had some kind of fun elements in the movie. There's some kind of fun scenes that he does and stuff like that. But Trevante Rhodes was the one that I think if they had switched and he had been the star of the movie, I think that's where this would have really worked really well. One thing that could have been interesting, right, that they could have done with this to make this a little bit, so to get rid of the problematic element of the sun being on the spectrum, right? What if you have Trevante Rhodes as the hero, right? And what happens is, what Boyd Holbrook does is when he encounters the Predator, he collects some of his Predator stuff and he ships it home. And he meant to ship it to a P.O. box that he had, but because he wasn't paying the P.O. box, it got shipped to his house where his ex-wife and son were. The son takes it apart and starts like playing with the Predator stuff and starts to like, I guess figure everything out that the Predators do. He kind of understands how they work by playing with all that stuff. Would have been interesting if you had to do the kid route, if you absolutely had to have a kid in this movie, which I don't think you had to, but what if you have Trevante Rhodes as the main character? And he's divorced, and his wife's his daughter, right? So you've got a young African American woman who's getting into STEM, who's sort of going on that path of sort of a career in STEM. But as a young at that time, so she's really interested and curious about it. It would have been interesting maybe to do it that way instead of it being like, the whole autism spectrum, like, that whole, I don't know, that's a stereotype, right? But again, I don't even know that you need kids. Like, why do we always have to, like the kids part, I think was one thing that I think muddied the film up. And I think, again, the whole like Predators with the DNA and stuff muddied the film up as well. There's a plot point though in here that I did like. And the idea is that the sort of the original Predators, one that aren't enhanced with the human DNA and the other DNA, one of them is sort of like trying to, I guess, come back to Earth to warn us that the Predators are going to kind of try to, I guess, harvest us for our DNA. And he gives, at the very end, we find out that he gives us a weapon that we could use to fight the Predators. And there's really, really obnoxious, like, bad Seagalish scene where that Boyd Holbrook character, he's like standing there with his army outfit on, like the beret and everything, and he looks down and sees like the whole like armor or whatever that the Predator gave us, and he's like, oh, that's my work suit or something like that, and he's like all cool about it and everything. It's just like, it was so fugazi. And I don't know if Shane Black was seeing this and being like, okay, some of this is fugazi. I mean, the other thing too is that I guess there's a whole lot of reshoots, and so when a movie has a lot of reshoots, right, that there's going to be issues there as well, and so that's another element of this that was a problem, right? Was the reshoots piece of it. That trick never works, right? As we say, what was that? Rocky and Bullwinkle, right? Is that what that was? That trick never works. I can't. But we always run into problems with that, and that was definitely an issue as well. I think like Edward James Olmos was in the movie originally, and they had to cut all of his scenes out. There's supposed to be this idea. There's this really cool concept that I don't know why they didn't go with this. I don't know why it didn't play well for test audiences. But they had this idea that there's these predators come from from wherever the and they fight alongside of the soldiers that were going to the insane asylum. They fight together against the bad predators, and there's sort of like this pitched battle of all of that. And I don't know why the test audiences didn't like it. I mean, I do wonder with the Predator. I think there is maybe an element. And I think when we get into Prey, I think we kind of see like maybe where the Predator franchise is going. But I do wonder if part of it is right that again, Disney has the ability to sort of choke off the theater at that time, right? Because they can put out a Star Wars movie, an MCU movie, a Pixar movie, their own Disney movie. And so if you're Fox, right, you're lucky that you got in enough screens with Deadpool because there was enough of a buzz there with that. And so you're able to do that. But then with the other one, I mean, they got plenty of screens, right, for Predator, for the Predator, but it's like once that thing didn't do well, it's suddenly those screens start to go away quickly, and so once you're out of the gate with a bad opening weekend, you lose screens, and you can't really recoup it as well as you'd like to. I mean, again, it's not like this movie does horribly, right? It does roughly twice its budget, but it just wasn't what they were hoping it would be. It's interesting because I think it was Boyd Holbrook who was saying like, oh well, the first movie just kind of caught lightning in a bottle, and it's just maybe Predator's not meant for these kinds of movies. Well, I mean, I don't know. We're going to be talking about Prey here in a bit, and I think the idea that like the first Predator caught lightning in a bottle one is completely erroneous, or not true at all, because when you watch that movie, it holds up as a fantastic classic actioner. It didn't just catch lightning in a bottle. It was a really good, fun movie. And I do wonder, though, to some extent, it's like, how much of the audience has changed a bit with that kind of thing. I mean, again, you're trying to sell the Predator to a Marvel audience, an MCU audience. You could sell Deadpool to them, right? Just like you could sell Aquaman, the first Aquaman, to them. You could sell some of these to them, but can you sell the Predator to them? I don't know, right? So somebody who's born in the late 80s, early 90s, in particular the early 90s, right, who's grown up on the MCU, when they're looking at movies to go see, are you is there enough to grab them to say like, oh yeah, you want to check out this Predator thing? I think this kind of gets back to the whole story element, because the Predator, when you think about it using the Highlander comparison, right? I don't know if the Predator is like Endgame, maybe, right? Or the movie where they kind of pass the baton or something. It's a movie that sort of tries to incorporate as much of the previous stories as it can, which I appreciate that. I think that's a good idea there. I think what we would have liked is something a little more streamlined. I think for me, at least, when I think of what makes a good Predator movie, it's a very simple plot, right? It's not something crazy and over the top. I know Shane Black was trying not to go overly blockbuster with this, but when you watch it, I mean, there's a scene at the end when like the Predator is about to take off with the guy's son, and they're all kind of on the ship trying to get him, and there's like this, you've got like kind of the theatrical like orchestral music, right? The that kind of thing going on, and then it's like, will they or won't they? Are they going to make it or not make it? And really, it's just a matter of just killing everybody off that isn't the hero, right? That's the whole point of it, right? It's just everybody else dies, and our info dump guy is the only one who's worthy of surviving at the end, which is again, it's Fugazi, but it's kind of what they're doing there, and it's like it's so like cliche blockbuster kind of thing. And the thing I loved about Predator and Predator 2 is that it wasn't Fugazi, like, cliched blockbuster thing. And you can say the same thing about Predators, I think. Is that one thing you can say about Predators is it's also not cliche blockbuster thing. But this is doing cliche blockbuster stuff. Yes, it's R-rated. Yes, it's bloodier. It's got, that kind of thing. But it's still people hanging on for dear life on cliffs and stuff like that, and how, in spaceships, and are they going to survive? And again, the kid thing is another kind of like cliche blockbuster thing that I just don't know that we necessarily needed there. So yeah, I don't know. And again, there's characters in this that I really liked. I mean, again, Olivia Munn's character, I think she's the kind of character that you could bring back and have her be like, working for things. I think if they were going to take this thing and move it in the direction of like Alien versus Predator is part of the story and everything's going to be a part of it, Olivia Munn would be great as someone who's like working for like Wayland Industries or something like that, who she gets a job with them and she's like, studying predators and stuff like that more. Again, the problem is, right, when the way this movie ended, right, that the guy's son is working for them, doing kind of like working on predator stuff or whatever. So, so Olivia Munn's, that wouldn't necessarily work as well. I mean, I don't know. I think the thing I wanted to talk about, though, I think, is that, comparing this to the MCU, where the MCU is very tight and they sort of have an idea of where they want to go with their stories, and you've got some freedom within that piece, but for the most part, you've got to just sort of, you've got to stick to kind of what they want you to do. And I think you could look at Shane Black in Iron Man for that, right, where I wonder if he comes out of Iron Man, right, where Iron Man 3, where he's like, being told like you got to stick with certain things, you got to keep things within a certain way. Yes, you can write your screenplay, but it's got to fit what we want for what we're doing overall here in this second phase. And actually, one of the things about phase 2 is that it's also setting up phase 3, right? So all of these story things have to kind of work towards other things. Whereas with the Predator, I'm sure they went to him with the Predator and they were just like, do what you want, right? You it's up to you how you want to do this. And you got all this freedom. And I think sometimes when you have too much freedom, you go all over the place, right? And you need somebody coming in. And then, of course, they gave him all this freedom to do all this stuff, and then when the test audiences weren't fans of what he had created, they're like, well, now you got to reshoot the entire third act of the movie, which is kind of, I don't know, to me it's too much. But so it's like, yeah, you get all this freedom to a point, and then the studio says, no, you actually don't have that freedom, and you got to pull back and do everything again. And so I think that might have been part of the problem, right? Is that, with the Predator, it's so open, and there's so many things you can do with the Predator, because there really isn't sort of like a canon as we talk about, right? I mean, people try to put the movies together and say that they're canon of some sort, but there isn't a real Predator canon. So you can do a lot of things with it. But that also means if you can do a lot of things with it, that you can do a lot of bad things with it, just as well as you can do a lot of good things with it, right? And I think one of the things that makes the first two Predators so good is that they're these very simple stories with compelling characters that you want to follow and see make it through. I mean, you've got that first crew of the mercenaries, right? And I mean, you've got Schwarzenegger, who just stands out as this just absolute alpha, the kind of guy that you just love watching just get after it. And you kind of forget what kind of screen presence he has when, he hasn't made a lot of movies recently that are like at the level of the Predator. I mean, you're seeing him kind of, hanging around in the Expendables and stuff like that. But when you go back to his 80s movies and early 90s movie, he's just so larger than life. So, okay, so we've got that guy, along with these really cool mercenaries. You've got Carl Weathers there, who's a big guy. You've got Jesse the Body. You've got Billy Duke, Sonny Landham, and of course, Shane Black himself, right, played one of the smaller role in that, but he was also in the Predator. But they're kind of these cool guys. They're listening to Little Richard. They're getting out there doing their thing, and they start getting picked off, right? So. And once they start getting picked off, again, it's really simple. It's about trying to figure out who's trying to kill us and how we eventually beat them, and discovering what, this thing that's trying to kill us is an alien, right? It's something from another planet, and it's got otherworldly technology, all of that kind of stuff. And then you get the famous Schwarzenegger line, right? If it bleeds, we can kill it, right? Which is this idea that, okay, this thing is not impervious, right? There is a way to do it, and somehow the Predator makes it happen. Second movie, right? It's kind of playing into the crime wave thing going on in the early 90s, the war on drugs and stuff like that. But it's a very simple story, right, where these two cartels are at war. The Predator shows up because there's a heat wave, and he sees all kinds of people. He sees their heat everywhere, and he can start killing them. And the Predator kills Danny Glover's partner and his friend, right? This guy's his partner and friend, and he wants revenge for that. He wants to take this guy down. He wants to bring the Predator to justice. That's his idea. That's what he's trying to do. Very simple plot, very simple idea, and just let it play out. And then they mix in this other element of Busey as like the government trying to investigate and catch the Predator, but they introduce this element in a way that it doesn't get in the way. It just enhances the film and makes it a little bit better. It's just two really simple, great ideas that just work. And I think that's the problem, right? Is that when you're given the keys to something like the Predator, how do you keep it simple and make it work on that level? And you start to kind of say what are some cool things that we could do with the Predator? And you hear me when I'm doing these podcasts, right? I come with all kinds of crazy ideas, right? I'm talking about a PETA, Predator PETA, or I'm talking about Predator anthropologists, right? Who are studying humans and fighting over whether or not they should be cloaked and all those kinds of things. So I come up with all kinds of crazy ideas for this too. I mean, I do like the idea that instead of it being they're harvesting DNA, that you've got Predator activists, right? Predator, a Predator PETA again, so to speak, who want to protect humans and other beings in other parts of the world, and think this whole hunting thing is bad, and we need to stop it, right? We're above this. We're supposed to be a civilized people, right? We've got all this really great technology, yet all we do is we spend all of our technology to go around hunting other beings, right? That would have been a really great idea, and that this Predator that's coming to warn us about that is really more about again, you're thinking about the PETA thing, when you've got the PETA operative who does undercover work at a factory farm and exposes to the rest of the world what happens in a factory farm, right? It's one of those things that it's one of the fascinating things, right? I grew up, I think most of us grew up in America thinking that our food came from these nice farms, right? That's the farmer with the overalls and the straw hat and maybe the piece of straw, a piece of wheat or something coming out of their teeth. And, Betsy's big enough now. We got to take Betsy to slaughter. And it's poor Betsy. But, Betsy's kind of lived a nice life running around in the farm in the mud and all that stuff. And it's like, the factory farm people are like, no, that's actually not how it works. But the big, agricultural industry, they want us to believe, right, that that's what it is that when I eat bacon, I'm eating this pig that, yes, it's bad that it was killed, but it lived a nice life on the farm instead of it being, caged in a pen where it can't move at all. That's its life, and we know pigs are as sentient as dogs, right? So essentially you're thinking about taking your dog and treating your dog this way. But the factory farm, the PETA operatives or whoever else, whatever, Humane Society, whoever it is that goes in with, undercover cameras and things like that. And they expose this kind of stuff because the industry wouldn't want you to see that. And granted, I think for a lot of people, they don't want to know it either, right? You'd rather your bacon be, $2 a pound and have the pig be mistreated than to have to pay for like, better bacon. I know, because my wife has a lot of food allergies, so we get the better bacon when we get it, and it is more expensive. It definitely tastes better, that's for sure. But you also, it's hard to be like, oh, I can't enjoy bacon, right? Or whatever. And I don't really eat pork that much myself. I probably eat it most when I'm getting hoagies here in Philly because it's just. The Italian hoagie in Philadelphia is one of the greatest food items I think in America. And so if you haven't had one and you're here in Philly, you got to get Italian hoagie. Unless of course you don't eat pork, then find a different sandwich to have here. But what I'm saying is, again, it would have been a really funny idea, a really cool idea to have a segment of the predator population that thinks that what the predators do is inhumane, right? They shouldn't be out just, murdering humans. Even if they think they've got a code, right? Where, well, we're not killing, and maybe even the code, right, is born out of some of these ideas, right? That like maybe predators in the past indiscriminately killed pregnant women and they indiscriminately killed, people that were defenseless and didn't have weapons and things like that. And this code maybe comes out of previous protests and previous, and maybe it's even a law, right? Maybe there's a law that says like if you're going to be a hunter, right, you've got to have your camera on, like similar to like body cameras, right, with police officers, and you've got to have your activities documented, and you've got to make sure you follow certain rules. Same with like my dad when he was a hunter, right? He couldn't just shoot deer whenever he wanted to, right? He had to shoot deer at a certain month of the year. It was 1 month in Maine and it was a different month in New Hampshire, so he could do 2 months of hunting. But also you can only get one deer, right? You can only shoot one deer. Maybe there's these rules and things like that, and it would have been a cool idea to be like, okay, these bad, like maybe they're like poachers, right? The other predators are poachers, which I mean, again, I always talk about poachers being baddie in a can, right? I mean, you watch an old '90s DTV movie when there's poachers out there, right? You just want to see Don the Dragon Wilson or whoever just beat the crap out of them right away, right? Like that's an easy baddie. But wouldn't that be interesting, right? That there's predators that are poachers, and then there's like maybe even game wardens, right, or things like that, like all kinds of ideas that they could have done here that they didn't. But again, that's me saying like, okay, there's so much that we haven't tapped into with Predator that's not being tapped into, so it's an interesting concept, it's an interesting idea, and this movie, I think, with this idea of the predators being evolving and all of that stuff, I think it just becomes a little bit too weird. But I'm wondering too, because there's an idea that the predators are evolving or getting bigger in Predators, and I'm wondering too if Shane Black is trying to incorporate Predators into this, a little bit to some extent. I don't know, because again, this is supposed to take place before it, but yeah. So I mean, there's that piece there, right? That the story goes a little bit overboard with the whole DNA thing. Also, again, I think the characters are not as compelling. Again, I think the most compelling of the characters is Trevante Rhodes. I think he was the one that kind of does it for me the most out of everybody in this. And I think, again, it would have been nice if things were centered around him more. I think, I think it would have kind of worked better. I mean, the other thing too, right, that we've talked about on here before, is that you've got the very first movie, you've got Schwarzenegger as kind of your strong white male. Stereotypical white male character. Although there's nothing stereotypical about Schwarzenegger, right? He's larger than life. But then, with Predator 2, you've got Danny Glover in a role that at that time really only, other than Eddie Murphy, African American actors were not getting leads in action films. So he gets that action lead there. Sanaa Lathan in Alien vs. Predator. And then Alien vs. Predator Requiem, right? We kind of slightly, a kind of a mix of your standard white guy here, kind of one note white guy who looked like he could have been like a lead in like he would have been like the heel, not the actual lead in a Hallmark Christmas movie, right? He would have been kind of the jerk, and then like this young woman goes back home and meets this lantern-jawed Canadian guy and falls in love with him all over again. That's right. That's kind of what you get with Alien vs. Predator Requiem. But you had Rico Ellsworth there, who's kind of hanging around, and she's kind of a co-lead, I guess, a little bit there. So they're still kind of working in that tradition a bit. And then we get Adrian Brody, who I think, again, I liked him as the lead in that, but we're getting back to just plain old white guys. Even though the cast was diverse, it's kind of like back to your plain old white guy lead, even though, again, I think Brody does bring something more to the role. I think, again, if you're not doing a Schwarzenegger type lead, having an Adrian Brody who's like a really great actor play that part and really kind of turn in a compelling performance, I think is a good way to go. And then here we're just going one note white guy hero guy, right? It's just kind of just there. It's just, there's nothing. Boyd Holbrook is not bringing a lot. I mean, he has some funny lines, some funny parts in the movie, but again, he's also inhabiting that space of the heel who the woman in the Hallmark Christmas movie dumps. Like maybe like they're living in New York and he's a jerk New York like lawyer or something, and she's like, I just need to go back to my hometown. And she goes back to Vermont, which is actually like, I don't know, some place in British Columbia, but it's supposed to be Vermont. And, here's this lantern-jawed, like, I don't know, my bricklayer. My dad was a bricklayer. Maybe that's what, or like an arborist, right? Or something like that. Like maybe he sells Christmas trees or something. And she just falls in love with him again, right? And that's Boyd Holbrook is supposed to be the jerk that gets us there, right? That we're just like, yeah, just dump that guy and go find that lantern-jawed Canadian somewhere. That's just going to work. That's so much better. And again, it doesn't work as a hero, right? And apparently they wanted Benicio del Toro as the lead initially, and then there were some scheduling conflicts. That could have been interesting, right? Benicio del Toro would have brought the same kind of energy. Well, he would have been different from Adrian Brody, but he would have brought that same kind of method acting energy to this. It would have been really, really great. So I think that would have worked. I mean, Thomas Jane, I don't know. The character's having Tourette syndrome. I don't know that we necessarily need it. But that was what he was doing there. But I think you could have Thomas Jane as more of his Punisher self, and it works better as sort of like a background. He could have been like kind of your Billy Duke kind of character, and it would have worked better. And again, I did like Olivia Munn, and I think that's the one that I think, out of all the performances in this, I think that's the one, again, other than Trevante Rhodes as well, that I think you'd want to kind of see in something like this again. I think Trevante Rhodes, I think he's just bringing it in this movie with even just the small parts that he has, and it's a shame. Also, Sterling K. Brown was interesting as the agent, as kind of the jerk agent character. I liked him, and sort of in that he wasn't Busey, right? He wasn't Busey from Part 2, but he was bringing his own kind of Busey energy to this, and I liked that. I liked that kind of role. So, there's some things that work there, but I think there's a sense that this movie, there's a lot going on here that I think, for me, I wouldn't have wanted in a Predator movie, and I don't know like what they do with this stuff. I don't know with what Shane Black did here, if they continue with it, with this idea that the Predator, they could also have said that like, okay, with this Predator who comes and warns us, maybe it stops the whole thing and they don't do it, and maybe there's a sea change within Predators. One of the things that I think about these movies, and this one in particular, is we don't get enough of what the Predators are doing. I think they actually have a name. They're alien races like the Yatya or something like that. I just like to call them the Predators. I think that works better. But there's stuff that they could be doing that we're again the other parts of their society that we don't see. And so I think it would be interesting to see if they either do something with it, if they do another movie. I know the next movie is supposed to be another prequel, I think, Badlands. So Prey is a prequel, and I think they're going to do another one that's kind of in the prequel vein. So I wonder if they're just afraid to kind of go beyond this movie, because it does feel like Shane Black kind of wrote them in a lot of corners here with this, and you'd have a lot to clear up. I also kind of, to be honest, I feel like Predators also wrote them into corners. I think there's stuff that it's hard to kind of, once you putting humans on game preserves and stuff like that, especially if it's something that they've been doing for a long time, which is they kind of made it seem like in Predators that the Predators have been abducting people and putting, which I guess you'd be abducted, but again, what would have been interesting I didn't even think of this when I was talking. I just thought of this now for Predators. But you always talk about the alien abductions, right? There's that idea of the alien abductions where people are abducted and they come back like 3 days later and they don't remember anything. That would have been the way to do it, right? Is that the Predators abduct people, and if they survive, they just bring them back, right? So Adrian Brody and Alice Braga, right? They survive, right? They've beaten the Predators and they survive. The next thing they know, like this white light comes out for them, right? Because we always hear about the white light in the alien abductions. The white light comes, and then we see Adrian Brody wake up in his bed, and it's like 3 days later, whatever it is, right? And he doesn't remember anything. He doesn't remember any of it happening or anything like that. But he notices he's got like scars and stuff on him. He's like, "What happened to me? Where did?" And when he misses a job as a mercenary, like, "Where were you, man? You're supposed to be here 3 days ago for this job or whatever." And Alice Braga's back where she is in Israel. Same thing, right? She's like considered AWOL. That would have been a really cool ending to that. I think that would have been, kind of tied into more alien abduction kinds of things. I think it would have been an interesting way to go there. But they didn't, they didn't do that. They did the lazy ending. They did the, there they go walking off into the sunset trying to find a way out of there. But yeah, I think, they could still do that, right? You could still do another Predators and have it be that. Have Adrian Brody wake up in his bed and what happens after. But yeah, I think, again, where we're at right now with these movies, we're going into Prey right now. I think, we've gotten a little bit out of control with the stories here a bit. And again, we're going in different places here. We've got, our last movie was Highlander 3. This one's Highlander Endgame. There's a fear, right, of course, that Prey could be the source, right? That could be where we're going here. And there's a very good possibility, right, that Prey, based on what they were looking for here, they could have very easily made the source for Prey. It could have been the source. Fortunately, spoiler alert, it's not the source. It's my third favorite of the series when we get in and talk about that one here in a bit. So, well, why don't we take a break here? We'll leave the Predator right here at this place here, and we'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to finish up our look at the Predator franchise with Prey. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. All right, we are back, and we are about to wrap up our look at the Predator franchise with Prey. So this is the most recent film. There is talk about making one after this called Badlands, but at least for right now, 2022's Prey is the most recent one. So it came 4 years after, comes out 4 years after The Predator came out. It's the first of the films. It's the first one of these movies that comes out after Disney buys 20th Century Fox, right? So it's under the 20th Century Films banner, I think it's called, 20th Century Studios. That's what it's, 20th Century Studios. So that's the banner that it's under. And I think for me, why I really like this one. I mean, I look at Prey as being right behind 1 and 2. This is my Predator 3, right? So if Robert Rodriguez wants to say that Predators is his Predator 2, right? And that he's not, acknowledging any of the other films. To me, this is my Predator 3, right? It just fits in so perfectly for me, within those. There's something though I was thinking about, because with the story, this is a very simple story, which, the first two had relatively simple stories as well, right? There wasn't a lot of backstory in terms of what the Predators were about. There weren't like convoluted ideas or anything like that. And this one kind of gets back to that root, but it is something I was thinking about, that like if this movie had come out in 1994 instead of 2022, I wonder how I would have felt about it. Like if I would have felt like, oh, they're just, working over the same territory. I mean, there is enough different in this, I think, to make it a different film from the first two Predators, even if it follows a similar paradigm overall. There's enough that they're doing here that's different that makes it good, but I do kind of wonder if maybe I needed to see them kind of go, see the Predator series go a little bit bigger and not work as well to come back and appreciate something like this. I'm not sure. So basic premise behind this movie. So you've got Amber Midthunder. She plays woman, a Comanche woman named Naru. And this movie takes place in 1719, I believe is the year, something, early 18th century in the Great Plains area of the United States. I don't know if like Iowa or something like that, or maybe further west, because they show a lot of mountains, so it could be further west. But it's a time when the French are starting to sort of do their fur trade in that area, so they've sort of started to populate that part. So they are, First Nations people are coming into contact with Europeans at that time, and so then Naru, the thing with her character is that she, with the gender division of labor, right, that you'd see in their society, right, women don't hunt, right. Generally, women provide food, in other ways, right, whether it's like, looking for root vegetables, there's a scene where you see her kind of pulling up sweet potatoes or something like that, that kind of thing. But they were providing other, things, whereas hunting was more what men did. And so with her wanting to be a hunter, she's sort of kind of making her way, she's kind of going against societal norms, right, at that point. And so she's sort of trying to push her way into being a hunter. She has an older brother, Tabe, played by Dakota Beavers, who is the only film role that he has. I think he's a musician by trade. That's more where his artistry or fame comes from. But this is his only acting role. But he's really great in this. But it's an older brother, and he's actually a very skilled hunter and very popular within their community. So he's known for that. And so for her to try to make her way into that, it's a tough thing for her. But he respects it as a hunter. He does respect her ability, but even he has trouble with the idea of her being a hunter. At the same time, a predator shows up, right? And the predator is starting to kill things. And so what's happening is, the society, they don't have an understanding of the predator at first. So they think that maybe there was a mountain lion that attacked one of their, because one of their tribes people is attacked, and they think that maybe it's a mountain lion, but Naru, as she's walking around, she's starting to see things that say this isn't a mountain lion. It's not a bear, right? It's something bigger, something more deadly than that. And nobody's really listening to her. So that's kind of how the story goes on, is that she's got to, kind of contend with this, and she's kind of decided that she wants to take this predator down, right? She doesn't know it's a predator yet, but she wants to take them down. Same as she runs afoul of the French fur trappers, and so there's that element of it. And of course, the predator also kind of, sees them. The other thing with the predator, and this is maybe where you could say that maybe Dan Trachtenberg, who's co-wrote this film and directed it, is maybe erasing the Alien versus Predator films, is that this predator, it's almost like the first time the predators have come to Earth. This is like their first visit here, because what you see with this predator is that he's trying to sort of figure out who the apex predator is on Earth. And he thinks it could be a snake at first, it could be a wolf, it could be a bear, right? And so Naru, she watches the predator encounter, because she's getting chased by a bear, right? She's getting attacked by a bear, and then the predator grabs the bear and has a fight with her, So there's that element as well. So there's a sense that, like, the predator is sort of learning our planet and trying to figure out, the lay of the land and how everything works there, which is interesting, right? And there's also, the predator has more primitive weaponry from what the predator has in the 87 and the 1997 Predator movies. And of course, what we see in some of the other films. In terms of, and I think that's your basic premise, right? And so that's really up to her as, it's kind of your standard premise in these, where you've got the person who survives at the end. Naru's our survivor, right? And of course, the predators, they never make it, right? There's always, whenever there's a main predator on the bill in one of these movies, they die, right? They don't survive, and that's no different here. That Naru finally is able to use her cunning and her guts to defeat him. The thing is, right, what Naru uses to her advantage is the fact that the predator doesn't see her as a threat. And we've seen this throughout, the Predator movies, right? That if the Predator doesn't see someone as a threat, they don't attack them, they don't kill them, because they don't see any sport or any cunning in that, or any killing in that, or any there's no point to it for them, right? It's not doing them any good. And so she kind of makes herself look like she's not worth the hunt, and then by the time the predator realizes, oh no, she's very deadly, it's too late, right? And she takes him down. This just all around, it just works on so many levels for me. I love that they went with the Comanche Nation, and had it take place. I kind of would have liked it better if it took place even before the Europeans came and had it, because I do kind of feel like, and this is something I get here in Philadelphia. I mean, I've lived here in Philadelphia for 10 years. Of course, I lived in New England as well, which New England also has a lot of colonial history. And there's always this sense whenever you go to a museum or you go to like a historic house or anything like that, there's always this sense that like nothing existed before the European settlers came, right? So the first post office, right here in Philadelphia, you've got the first post office. Well, what about all of the things that existed before then, right? And there's just no mention of any of that kind of thing. It's as if history didn't start until William Penn set foot on the shore here in Pennsylvania, or until the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock, right? And one of the things I think with some of these movies is that when you're going historically about First Nations peoples, a lot of times, because they do tend to be sort of in that period of time when because it creates tension, right? When the Europeans come, it creates tension that they almost always have to take place within that time period. It's almost like, again, like the history can't exist before it. One exception to that is the Echo series, right? Because that on Disney Plus, where they do actually go pre European settlement with some of the flashback sequences that they use. So at least Echo did try to go in that direction. So that was one kind of complaint. It's not that it was a complaint. I think sometimes it's kind of a too easy thing to do. The other thing too is that again, we always have that element of the white colonists who are they're the sense of danger, right? Whenever we've got stories about First Nation people from this time period, and one of the things I think with the French is that the French were not quite the same as the English or the Spanish. I'm trying to think about the Dutch maybe, and that the French, one of the ways they're depicted here is that they essentially, when they're killing the buffalo or the bison, is that they just take the hides off and leave the rest of the corpse to rot there. That's not how the French did it. I know that just because part of my culture, my dad, when he shoots a deer, right, he doesn't just take the deer hide, right? He completely butchers it. We even, I've eaten like deer heart, he'll liver, things like that. Like he doesn't do the brain. He doesn't do the brain, which what I'm about to talk about now is that when I was doing archaeology class at the University of Maine, they would, because I was an anthropology major, they would talk about archaeological digs, for like French settlements in around this time, or maybe even a little later. And they said that you'd find like bear skulls that had been scraped out because that was like a delicacy for these French trappers, was the brains of bear, right? And we know, the French are big fans of organ meat. And so French fur trappers at this time, and I think probably throughout the time that they were there in the New World, in the Americas, when they killed an animal, they used all of it. They kind of followed the lead of the people that were already here, who were showing them, sort of some of their trapping techniques and their slaughter techniques and all of those kinds of things. And they kind of followed in that lead. And so the French fur trappers would not have just left a whole bunch of buffalo corpses, that were completely skinned, just lying around in the open plains. They would be taking those buffaloes and using them completely. That's really how they did that. I don't even know if they were killing buffalo for fur trapping. I think it was more smaller animals that they would trap, like beavers, right? Particularly like beaver pelts and that kind of thing. But yeah, so what I think they were trying to do is they wanted to have that sense of like the danger of the Europeans. But the French don't quite fit that mold. Now, I'm not saying the French were great as an imperial power, right? Because you could point to, how they were in like, the Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, Tunisia, Africa, lots of places in Africa. So they've got a really bad history of that. And, bad enough, right, that they were living in this area that, the Comanche or whoever, other nations that were living in those areas wouldn't have claimed the land. They wouldn't have thought that we have the right to claim this land. But the fact that the French just showed up and like, oh no, this whole stretch is ours, and we're going to sell it to America so that we can fund a war in Europe, that's bad enough, right? The fact that they just, they essentially, even if the French were better to the Comanche and other nations that were living with them when the French came, they still felt that it was within their purview to just sell whatever land that they were living on to America, so then Lewis and Clark could come and map it, and then Americans can come through and create their devastation. The manifest destiny, right? That in school we learn manifest destiny is a good thing. Later in life you learn that manifest destiny led to mass genocide and deaths and hardship for a lot of people. And so I think they wanted that sense of that danger, that impending danger, right? That you've got the one in the alien predator who's coming to affect them, and then you've got the Europeans who are coming. I think it just, again, it just doesn't work as well with the French, right? If they'd gone like 100 years later and had it been Americans, that would have been different, but then there would have been the sense of like, alienness within the French, right? The Comanche or whoever else would have had a century to live with Europeans and get to know them better. It would have been a little bit different. But that was, that was just, again, that's a kind of a small quibble with a film that overall I think worked really well. I think the idea, again, some of these conflicts that Naru, played by Amber Midthunder's character, that she was going through, again, trying to make herself a hunter, and again, in a world when that's not really, women don't generally do that, and trying to kind of, that struggle that she's going through there, at the same time, being the one who kind of recognizes the danger of the predator and wanting to kind of use it to prove her mettle, at the same time, wanting to try to warn everybody of the danger. One of the things I love is at the end when she brings the predator head back with her, the tribal elder, the chief, he doesn't know what to do, right? Because he's used to the ceremony when a hunter brings a major kill back, that's supposed to be a man that's having that ceremony. And he's not sure if he can do it with a woman, but he does. He does it with a woman there. It's an interesting thing just from an anthropological spectrum overall, because, we know that probably one of the reasons why the status of men went up and women went down when farming started was because when you look at sort of our earlier, food foraging societies, hunting was the public pursuit, whereas for women they were generally providing most of the food for their families in the form of like small little animals and root vegetables and fruits and things like that, whereas hunting, you can only get so much food from hunting, right? So you've got to share it with the other the local bands, so everybody got to see the hunting, and that became the popular thing. I remember they talked about different techniques they tried to use to keep people from getting a big head, right? Like they called there's something called insulting the meat, where if a hunter had a really great kill, when people were eating it, you'd be like, oh, this is meat's tough, it's horrible, and all that stuff. It doesn't take long as humans, right, to figure out that what people are doing with that, and knowing like, no, I had a good kill there, right? People are just saying that to try to keep you from getting a big head, but I know what I did there. And so I think as farming started to kind of isolate people, these sort of the fact that men were inhabiting more public spaces than women were kind of led to this sort of isolation for women, and then kind of goes into that period there of sort of a where we're still trying to get back to a level of equality now, and so what you're seeing here in this is that it's not that in the Comanche that men and women have one has lower status than another, right? It's just it's a different, right? It's everybody's equal. There's an egalitarian society there, but in her case, she just sort of wants to do that, the hunting piece, right? Most women were content doing what they saw as women's work, and men were content doing, but I think the other thing too is that there is a kind of a path for it, right? That there's a sense of like, okay, what Naru's doing isn't common, it's not normal, but it's something that she wants to pursue. And so of course they, some people weren't in favor of it, but others were. And I don't know, you get all of that sense. I'm going through this huge tangent here, right? All this stuff, but it's all this stuff that's kind of underneath the surface of what's going on in the film. And I really appreciate a movie that can do it that way, right? That you can get all that sort of subtext there, and you can pull all of these different things with a plot that's moving along really well for an hour and 40 minutes is what this is. And it's making sure that it's covering kind of the broader strokes, right? Kind of and moving quickly through those broader strokes and keeping a solid amount of action throughout and kind of keeping things going, while it has these other subtext elements that you can pick up and you read between the lines on, not pick up and not deal with, not even care about so much, and just really stick with the action. I think that movies don't always pull this kind of thing off well. The fact that this one does, it pulls it off as well as it does, and still gives us such a great, solid, straight-ahead actioner. I just think it's fantastic. It's going to be curious to see kind of what comes next with the Badlands movie. I mean, one thing I would say is I don't know if I want this version of, if I want more of Amber Midthunder's Naru character, I don't know if I want more of her story or if I want a different kind of Predator element or something else there. Because I think what we get three really unique takes on it, right? With these, if I'm thinking of 1, 2, and this one, right? The first movie, it's mercenaries, all really highly trained soldiers going through the jungle in Central America. Then you've got urban setting, right, and modern urban setting, kind of almost futuristic with Danny Glover kind of surviving in that situation. And then we've got something here, right, in the 18th century in the plains in the United States. So you almost want to feel like, okay, what are some other elements we could put the Predator in, which could be interesting, right? You could do an Old West kind of thing, feudal Japan, some really interesting things you could do with the Predator there, right, if you wanted to. But I don't know too if the mindset is, well, there's more meat on this bone that we could cover as well, and that's a thought that they were having. I'm not sure. Again, I like the idea of it being a slightly more how do I say a primitive predator, or a predator that didn't have the kind of technology, which again, when we go back to Alien versus Predator, right? There's that idea that, the Predator or the Anunnaki, right? They've been coming here for millennia, showing us how to build, pyramids and giving us technology and all of that kind of stuff. And this, right? This movie essentially says no to that, right? Because in this case, this Predator has never been, the Predators haven't been to Earth before. This is their first visit, and he's sort of trying to figure out where, who is the person that we need to be killing, right? And he discovers that after a little bit, it's the humans, right? Those are the ones who should be killed. So, I mean, there is a way you could fit the two in. And it wouldn't be retconning. I don't think retconning would be, I mean, I guess I don't know what the full definition of retconning is. I don't know. I mean, I guess, right, like it's like in the Fast and Furious movies when it's, when Han dies and we find out that it was, Jason Statham that killed him, right? Han dies in the third movie, right, in Tokyo Drift. Then we find out in the seventh movie that it was Jason Statham that killed him, or the end of the sixth, I can't remember. And then we find out that actually he didn't really die. If that's retconning, then I guess maybe that what I'm doing here is a version of retconning. But what I was thinking, the way you could fit the Alien versus Predator movie in with this idea is to just say that the archaeologist who was like reading all of the stuff and saying, reading all of the Predator hieroglyphs or whatever, he was reading it wrong, right? That whatever he was reading was incorrect, like he had the wrong idea. It could be the idea, right, that the Predators, they saw the pyramids when they came here and thought, those things look really nice. We should build our own versions of those, or build our own version of that underneath Antarctica when we do our thing against the aliens. Like they could be, I guess that's retconning, right? If you wanted to do it that way, but that would be the way I guess you could fit those in. And there's a part of me that wants to fit in the Alien versus Predator movies. There's a part of me that wants aliens in this universe with the Predators and wants those movies to exist in this. Again, that means you've got there's would have to be something done, I guess, with the I guess it's Predators is the one that, but who knows, right? I if I had my druthers, right, if it was either keeping Predators as part of the official storyline or canon or whatever, or keeping the two Alien versus Predator movies, I'd keep the two Alien versus Predator movies, even though the second of those two I like less than Predators. I still, I think, which would be kind of funny, right? That Robert Rodriguez is like, I'm going to eliminate all the Predator movies except for the first one when I make my movie, and that would be the one that gets eliminated. I think that would be kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, but I think that I still like the idea of that, something that I would still want to see. I guess the other thing too is it looks like Dan Trachtenberg is making the next movie. He's making Badlands. I think he's listed as one of the screenwriters as well. And so along with Patrick Eisen, who co-wrote this movie with him. So what that would mean is that might be the first time that we get any kind of like cohesion, right, between two Predator films. Because you think of the first one and the second one, there's some cohesion there, right? But it's still kind of, adding in new ideas. I think the first and second ones are the closest to having any kind of cohesion. Then I guess the Alien versus Predator to Alien versus Predator Requiem, that's the second, right? Those two have some kind of cohesion. And then Predators is its own thing, and The Predator is kind of its own thing too, where it's trying to, it's their own ideas, right? They're coming with their own ideas for these things. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we get sort of a second
a second movie that from the same creators and see what they do as they kind of further the story along. Um, definitely, I think this was the movie that the series needed. I think that Predators and the Predator, even if they did okay in the theater, they weren't the movies. I think that for people that were fans of the franchise, including myself, there was a sense. I hadn't seen The Predator before. I'd seen Predators, but I hadn't seen The Predator. I didn't catch that. But there's something about The Predator when I saw the ads and stuff for it that just didn't interest me. I didn't think it was, it seemed like they were just trying to make it into a big blockbuster thing and trying to I didn't bring this up when we were talking about The Predator, and maybe I should have, but in 2018 when I saw the ads for The Predator, there was a feeling at that time that it was just like, Fox is trying to, or whoever, the studios are trying to come up with another franchise, right? It was all about franchises at that time, and especially, I think more than the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a franchise, I think the big one was actually Fast and Furious, because that was the sense of like, oh, we can pull a franchise out of anything, right? If we do it right. And so everybody was looking for like, okay, well, what do we have? What are the properties that we have? I mean, remember, I think it was Universal was trying to do like a connected universe with monsters. So like, like Frankenstein and Dracula and all of them, they were trying to do their own version of that. And you saw like, there's attempts to kind of reboot the Charlie's Angels franchise. There was an attempt to try to make it happen with Terminator, right? They would always kind of trying to try it over again with Terminator. And I think in 2018, The Predator was a similar thing. Like, oh, if this works, then we've got ourselves a franchise that could potentially get us in the, $750 million to $1 billion with the different outputs. And of course, it doesn't do that. One of the things I think with this movie that works here is that it's almost like they kind of find their niche for The Predator, right? I think direct to Hulu is a good place for The Predator. I think, yes, I would love to see The Predator on the big screen. I think it would, it would be nice to be back on the big screen again. But I think with the current way that the film industry works, I think that direct to Hulu is a good place for these movies, at least for right now. I mean, maybe it builds up more. Maybe younger audiences gravitate towards it more, and it finds they find new audiences. I think they said the budget is $65 million. Again, I don't know how that works for something like Hulu. Like, okay, if the budget is $65 million, how do you like justify that in Hulu revenue? I don't know. I don't know how you would, just kind of the same way I was thinking about with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that if you did like direct to video or direct to Disney Plus Predator movies, how do they quantify that in terms of, is it more subscribers? Is that what it is? Is it more people adding? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how you do that exactly. So it's, I don't know. But I at the very least, I guess that's not my concern, right? It's not my concern. Like, what would it's not my concern for whether these, how they make their money or whatever. I'm just happy that they're making these movies, and I that's one thing I'd like to see is more of this kind of happen, more Predator movies, more in this kind of vein, more in this style. But I think that's the thing is like you can only do this style so much before you really have to start adding things on, and I think that's what they were trying to do. With the other movies, we could go back to that idea that Robert Rodriguez had of the arena, where somebody is, like that kind of like Predator arenas. I think for me, where I would want to see this go next, I think this movie for me here is like, great, we're resetting things, we're getting back to our roots for like what makes a Predator movie good, and it all works, right? All of it works the way I would want this movie to work. And so it's like, okay, we've reset, we've got back here, we've got a successful Predator film again. I think it's a movie that fans of the Predator were looking for, wanted, and this is it, right? This is the movie. Now it's time, I guess, to start building again, right? Start to kind of come up with better ideas. I think for me, what I want to see for more Predator stuff is I want to see more aliens, right? That's one big piece. I want to see, and when I say aliens, I don't just mean like the alien, the Ridley Scott Alien, so Alien versus Predator, but I mean like other beings, right? Other humanoid type, beings out there. I want humans to interact with them more. I want more Predator stories that involve less humans. I think it's one thing I liked about Alien versus Predator is that you got a kind of a team up between a Predator and a human. I want more of that kind of stuff, but I want more stories where it's less about the humans and more about what the Predators are doing and what the other aliens and those kinds of things. I think that's one of the things that hurt Alien versus Predator Requiem. Beyond the fact that the lighting was so bad, right? Was that it just was like kind of like your standard horror movie where it was just like all these stories about people that we don't necessarily care too much about. I want less of that. I mean, again, they did a great job here by making a very compelling story around a compelling character in Naru. That really worked. I really appreciate that. Again, I like it as a reset. I don't know if I need more of this, though, again, going forward. It's almost like, okay, I can almost kind of feel like Predator 1, 2, and this are a good, like, trilogy that you could watch, consecutively. But I don't need this one again. I need something more. I need them to kind of, and I guess the other thing too is, right, if you're only doing a budget of $65 million, can you do more, right? How much more can you do? And again, there's that idea too with there's what do I want to say? I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this here. But when Bob Iger was saying, I want to do safer things, I want things to be, safer ideas. It's curious to me, like, if this would fit as safer or not safer, right? Because 65 million seems safer, right? It seems safer than 200 million for a blockbuster that doesn't end up, doing anything in the theater. So, if this is sort of the price point that they want a Predator at, is in that 65 million range, and that might even be high, right? It might be that they start cutting and say, okay, well, no, you got 40 million for the next one, or 45 or something like that, and you've got to do it on less. I think if that's the case, right, I think where these get expensive is having more Predators in suits, right? And that's where you get a little concerned, because it's like, oh, if we have to do this on a budget, and I wouldn't be surprised, right, if the studio, with Disney in particular, would come to them and say, why do you have to have them in a suit? Why can't you just do CGI? We've got a raccoon in our movies. They make $750 million. And there's just a raccoon. It's a CGI raccoon, and we have a CGI tree that walks around too, and is voiced by Vin Diesel. And that's the most expensive part of it, is having Vin Diesel voice it. Why can't your Predators be that? And I think that's probably the concern, right? That's what we don't want, because the suits and the practical effects are what make the Predator, I think, what make this series so good. And I think that is a concern. Seeing that happen. So I don't know. It's kind of wrapping this up here. I think. Again, I think, again, if we're ranking the movies, the way I would rank them is I would have the first and second ones, 1, 2. I'd have this one right behind with 3 as my third favorite. I would have, for my fourth one, the first Alien versus Predator movie. Then I think I'd probably have Predators, The Predator, and the Alien versus Predator Requiem as the last one. I think you just gotta, I think you gotta have that one last, just because of, the fact that you can't see anything that's happening in it. But, I think that one could have been a good one, too, which is kind of too bad. Because the idea of a Predator alien, it should have been better, right? That concept of that should have worked better. And I guess the other thing about this that's interesting is, we did the Marvel Cinematic Universe before this. And with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we were looking at, like, this sort of these... you had unique directors who were putting their unique spin on the films, but overall, right, they all had to fit like this. How do I want to say? They had to fit like this, like the story that Kevin Feige and company, they had to kind of fit within what they wanted there for those kinds of things. Whereas with these movies, nobody really had to fit any kind of thing, right? Everybody kind of had their chance to just kind of go for it and do what they wanted with the Predators. And, I've spent like the past, 20 minutes trying to fit these movies together, or, figure out, can does Alien versus Predator still fit with these and all that kind of thing. But maybe that is the wrong idea. And again, even this one here, it fits itself in with the first two. It's like a prequel to the first two. There's the gun, right? Remember the gun that Danny Glover gets at the end of the second movie? Well, that movie, that gun makes an appearance here in this film. So the fact that gun is here, it kind of starts its journey here in this film. So it kind of connects this movie to the other ones. Yes, I like the idea of connecting the movies, but I also like the idea of this being a blank canvas. And as much as I was, giving Robert Rodriguez's hard time, with Predators, or, Shane Black's The Predator, I do like the fact that they kind of went for it. That they weren't tied to any kind of concept that they had to stick with here. And I think that is maybe one thing to think about as you know, as we have all these sort of connected universes, and we have these sort of overarching ideas that you have to kind of fit within these kinds of things. And one of the things I think we're going to see with the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that, as Bob Iger says, we need to be safer and not take as many chances. A lot of those Marvel characters are going to get shelved, right? Or if they're not shelved, they're going to have like very small roles, or they're going to be small parts or whatever. And this, you know, if that's the case, and if the Predator's best chance of getting through is being Hulu, you know, being a Hulu original, and, you know, sort of having these one-off kinds of things where you know, they can, you know, the people making the movie can just sort of, you know, I don't know what you say, like a Predator story, right? I was trying to think of what was it? Oh, right, like the John Wick, right, where it's like the Continental, right? A John Wick story or something like that, right? It's that idea that, you know, Prey is just a Predator story, and you kind of do it that way with a lot of one-offs. I would almost like that better, I think. It's one of the things I do is I watch this whole series go through. You know, again, you know, I did the Fast and the Furious franchise, and those were like very, like, you know, again, Vin Diesel has a very strict idea about how he wanted those movies to go, and they're very cohesive, and that's great. You know, it's one person's vision on how to make these things happen. Whereas like the Kickboxer films, right? It's like, you know, Albert Pyun comes in and does his thing, and then, you know, you get the two reboot movies. You know, they're you can kind of go in different places, right? And or Blood Fist, right, where it's almost like just, you know, 8 different movies essentially. I think the first and second movie are tied together, but then after that they're all kind of just, you know, go for whatever you want. That almost, there's a part of me now after having seen all these that I almost kind of like that better. That like, okay, each Predator movie should be its own thing, and just kind of just go for it and do different things with it. And so then you're not confined too with what happens in a previous movie if you don't want to be. And, you know, we'll see. I guess we'll see what comes from that. But yeah, I kind of feel like I've been rambling enough here. You know, we've just hit like almost 40 minutes or 35 minutes here already on this one here. I loved this movie when it came out. I loved watching it again. I think I was curious to see how I would feel after watching all of the other ones before it, if I would still hold it in the place I did. I think there was a part of me that thought maybe it was better than part 2, because I hadn't seen part 2 in a while. So that might be the only possible flip-flop there. But no, I mean, part 2 is just legit. I think maybe I'm harsher on Predators, knowing that it's named Predators because Robert Rodriguez wanted to wipe out Predator 2. When Predator 2, I will defend that movie to the death. I love that movie. And Prey slots in perfectly. If you were thinking about doing a Predator night, that would be the best night, would be the first, the second, and this one. They're all on Hulu, so I think that's another piece that makes it so great, is you could just, you know, the Alien vs. Predators on Hulu as well. I think that's like a kind of a separate night, right? Those two would be like a separate night. I guess, yeah, if I was doing a Predator film fest, that's how I would do it, which is interesting, right? Because you'd want to probably do them more in order, but I wouldn't do them in order like I watched this time. I would do Predator 1, Predator 2, and then Prey. Then I would do the Alien vs. Predators on Saturday, and then I would do those other two, the Predators and the Predator, as kind of the end one there. That's probably how I would wrap those up. Yeah, I think, you know, the other thing too, of course, is that the concept of the Predator, I think, is always, it's going to be an idea that people are always going to want to work with and always going to try. I say that, and of course, this franchise has gone long stretches of time without new movies. So, you know, the fact that we know we're going to have another one in 2025, at least we think so. I mean, you know, again, things are in flux at Disney right now, and Disney owns 20th Century Studios, and so they have the ability to scuttle or stop anything. You know, it's interesting because we haven't heard as much from Disney about, you know, Disney hasn't been doing quite the same as like you know, as Time Warner, where they've been, you know, making movies and then you know, just kind of tossing them aside as tax write-offs. We haven't heard of that happening yet, which is, I guess, a good thing. But there is that concern, right, that you know, these things can change. And so even though Badlands is like in development right now, it's with a planned release date of 2025, you know, that could change. And we could be here next year at this time with no Predator movies on the horizon. And if that's the case, it would be too bad. You know, we want more of these movies. But I think if this is the last one we get for a little while, I think we're left with a really good one. And I think that definitely, at least for me, I do appreciate that part of this as well. All right, well, yeah, I guess I've said what I needed to say about the Predator franchise. I enjoyed these. And again, the movies, the episodes definitely seem to get were received really well. And so I think these have been the best received since maybe, I mean, the Blood Fist ones, people really like those. So I think those two, this one and the Blood Fist ones, people really like. So I'm hoping John Wick will continue that energy. We'll kind of keep that moving there. But yeah, we'll do my plugs. It is still technically Indie April. So if you want to check out my newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available on Kindle and paperback. And then also Bainbridge, my short action novel, same thing, Kindle and paperback. You can get the links to those are in my podcast description, along with our Threadless page. So if you want to get some merch, I think right now as I'm recording, I think by the time this episode posts, I think the sale will be done. But Threadless is always running sales, so you can always check back and see when things are discounted. But yeah, I think everybody could use some DTVC merch, right? Get yourself a shirt or something like that. But we'll wrap up here. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll be back soon. In 2 weeks we'll come back with John Wick 1 and 2. That'll at least be the plan. But for right now, we'll kind of close the book on the Predator franchise. So thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk soon. Bye everyone.